DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And we're back. We're back with some more appetizers for you. We have some appetizers for you, and I'm talking UFC 323. So that's UFC 323. Dvalishvili versus Jan 2, and so that's Merab Dvalishvili, the champion, versus Petr Yan, the challenger, and that's for the bantamweight championship bout. And this card is this next Saturday coming up tomorrow. It's December 6th, 2025 at the T-Mobile Arena in Paradise, Nevada, United States. And let's just go over the prelims and early prelims, and then we'll kind of get into the main card. But anyways, can I get a menu? And so this card kind of I don't feel as if it is as quite as good as UFC 322, just from a distance, appearance. Main thing is I don't really think the prelims are quite as good as UFC 222. Like that's really kind of what, like, all the fights on the pay-per-view main card for UFC 322, all the outcomes of them was all like expected. So you got a little bit more craziness and some devastating knockouts from the prelims. But with this card, it's not necessarily that they're bad matchups, and a lot of times it's fighters that you don't really know who end up showing out and doing something you've never seen before. But the main issue is there's not a whole lot of notable names on the prelims. Like there's some people, a couple fighters that were kind of up and coming and just kind of just evened out, like their trajectory towards a champion kind of ended, and that's kind of they've become kind of more like gatekeepers, stepping stone. But there's only a couple of them, a couple fights with kind of notable names. I'll just go through them real quick. But for the early prelims, you have, for the co-main event of the early prelims, you have pretty notable names in regards, and this should be a good fight. But you have a lightweight bout between Edson Barbosa versus Jalen Turner. So those are very familiar and common fighters. And then for the main event, you have a catchweight bout. I guess it was supposed to be 185, but Bruno Ferreira weighed in at 129. He weighed 4 pounds over. But you have Marvin Vettori versus Bruno Ferreira, and man, it seems just like a couple. Like I was saying, it feels like some of these fighters had like an upward trajectory, and then they just kind of fell off. I think Marvin Vettori maybe had like some type of serious injury, and he goes from being like a title contender to early prelims. But yeah, you got Marvin Vettori and Bruno Ferreira for your main event for the prelims. And then onto the prelims, standard prelims, you have the second fight on the standard prelims. You have a women's flyweight bout between Macy Barber versus Karine Silva. So Macy Barber is pretty popular. I don't know if it's more because of her fighting, her like ability in the cage, or what the kind of stuff maybe that you see on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. But hey, Macy Barber, that's definitely a familiar name. And then the lightweight, the co-main event lightweight bout, you have Terrence McKinney versus Chris Dunn. And then the main event for the prelims, you have a lightweight bout between Grant Dawson versus Manuel Toro. So there's some familiar names familiar names on the prelims. I just didn't think it was quite as good as the previous pay-per-view that we had. And I mean, they got a lot to live up to because there were some devastating knockouts. What was it? It went from like the co-main event and then like the first two fights on UFC 322 and just had some devastating knockouts like back to back to back. So this card has quite a bit to live up to, and it's the thing that kind of hurts this card for me, even though these are very popular and like you could argue pound for pound, like best fighters in the division. It's the smaller weight classes that don't really move the needle for me too much, even though Alex Pantoja is like one of the greatest flyweights in a while, in a long time. And same thing with Merab Dvalishvili being one of the best bantamweight champions in a long while. But I don't know. It's just the potential for uh, getting like serious knockouts from lightweight to heavyweight. It just seems like it kind of falls off in the knockouts. But I mean, you still see knockouts and submissions at the smaller weight classes. It just I don't know. It just I don't like I said, it just doesn't move the needle for me too much. But I mean, you got some other names on this card that are familiar and are former co-main eventers or former main eventers in theirself, which I think helps this card as well. But let's get into the main card here now. So this is UFC 323, Merab Dvalishvili versus Peter Yan 2. And so the first fight on this card, you have a lightweight bout between Jan Blachowicz versus Bogdan Guskov. And Jan Blachowicz, main thing, like I said, I think that I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but this feels kind of like at least once you get to the main card, it feels like you got kind of like old head fighters or like kind of greatest all time, and then you got kind of like the young up and comers. But that's a serious deal. Jan Blachowicz must be one of, or if not, the oldest fighter in the UFC currently. So that always has me a little concerned when picking fights. Like, is a fighter they've just kind of stuck around maybe a little bit too long? But yeah, Merab Dvalishvili, 42 years old, and or no, not Merab Dvalishvili, Jan Blachowicz is 42 years old from Poland, and uh, originally his career was what like judo, and then uh, came had like good ground skills, but really, there at least the back end of his UFC career, he's was and when he was in like title contention for light heavyweight, like he was more of a knockout artist than anything, even though he had such a great ground game. But yeah, he's been on a bit of a rough stretch here recently. Let's see. So in his last five fights, he is 1-3-1, and that one is a draw, and he's on a two-fight losing streak to Alex Pereira and Carlos Holmbridge. But I mean, they weren't losses. They weren't. I mean, they were losses, but they were just decision losses. It's not like even at his age he wasn't getting knocked out or submitted or anything. But was brought to decision and lost some decisions and just hadn't had a whole lot of success for a little while. And so he's the old head that we uh, mentioned here. But then we have Bogdan Gusov, and he's what is he? He's from Uzbek, wherever that is. There, but he talking about the old head versus new head. He's only like 33 years old, and he is. Let's see, I think he's more of like a kickboxer. Yeah, he's a boxer and kickboxer. So it'd be interesting to see if Jan Blachowicz tries to use more of his uh, ground game against Bogdan Guskov. But and it seems like definitely here to the back end of Jan Blachowicz's career, he's been definitely relied a lot on his striking and just his straight up knockout ability. But see, in his last 5 fights, he is 4-1, and a he's on a 4-fight winning streak with with uh with three KOs, not knockouts, and then a submission. So Zach Plug, KO punches, Ryan Spann, TKO punches, Billy Elkanan, uh, guillotine, and then Nikita Krylov. So he's on a bit of a hot stretch here, on a bit of a hot streak here compared to meeting up with Jan Blachowicz, who's older and hit a bit of a rough patch. So in this light heavyweight bout between, let's see, I wanted to go over. Hold on, I wanted to go over their total wins here. So Bogdan Guskov has 21 uh, has 21 fights with 18 wins and 3 losses. In those 18 wins, he has 15 of them by knockout, 3 by submission, and then no by decision. So if he's going to win, it's probably going to be a finish. And then the 3 losses, he's been knocked out once, he's been submitted once, and he's uh, been and gone to decision once. So he's been beat any way you can think of, but just not a lot of times, only 3 times. And then Jan Blachowicz, his total fight record history was 41. He's had 41 fights with 29 wins, 11 losses, and in the 29 wins, he has 9 knockouts, 9 submissions, and 11 decisions. So it just beats you in any way, really. He's a true mixed martial artist, can beat you with the knockout, submission, or go to distance. And then 11 losses, he has 2 been knocked out twice, been submitted twice, and then 7 by decision, and then the 1 draw that we were talking about earlier. But in this fight, I know Jan Blachowicz or Bogdan Guskov has never won a fight by decision, but I think Jan Blachowicz is tough enough that he's probably going to take quite a beating in this fight, just in regards to Bogdan Guskov being a good striker and being younger. But Jan Blachowicz is tough, so I don't see Bogdan winning this by knockout. It probably be just by points and just damage, really. But I don't see him sleeping Jan Blachowicz. So in this light heavyweight bout between Jan Blachowicz versus Bogdan Guskov, I got Bogdan Guskov winning this by decision. All right. So now then, on to the bantamweight bout between it's like I said, it's another old head situation. You got possible young up and comers that are kind of on a bit of a win streak of their own, and then you got these older guys that are looking like they only maybe got 1, 2 more fights in their career and on a bit of a losing streak, while you got the young guys who are on a winning streak of their own. But you have a Henry Cejudo versus Peyton Talbot. And so Henry Cejudo, we know him as like a great wrestler, a freestyle wrestler, Olympic style wrestler, and he was a champ, uh, was a double champ, flyweight and bantamweight, and then he just kind of took a hiatus, and it looked like he'd retired when he was what? He was still pretty young. He was not much older than 30 years old, and basically like retired in his prime, and then here came back just a couple of years ago. Let's see when that was. Yeah, so he took like a 3-year hiatus and came back in 2023. And since then, he hasn't been real great. And he's 38 years old, so he's close to getting the same age as Jan Blachowicz. And the thing is, usually older fighters at least keep their power as they get older. It's the thing with younger and smaller weight class fighters. The thing that usually hits them first is slowing down. They slow down and lose a step, while heavier fighters, light heavyweights, they kind of at least keep their knockout power. But Henry Cejudo hasn't had a great run here since he's come back, and I imagine he probably just wants to get back on track. But I don't know if Peyton was it Peyton Talbot is the best option for that. And like I said, he's 38 years old, and he is 2-3 in his last 5 fights, and he's on a 3 fight losing streak, but they are some pretty respectable fighters. I can say that at least. He had a title shot against Aljamain Sterling, and then fought Merab Dvalishvili just in a standard three round fight, and then Song Yadong, and then that ended up. I guess that was a fight that had got to the third round, leading. I don't know why it says 5 rounds or 3 rounds, 5 minutes. Maybe that must have. Oh, that was a 5 round fight. So after the third round, he couldn't continue anymore due to an eye poke from Song Yadong. So they judged the fight from there, and I guess he lost by decision. But yeah, on a three fight losing streak. But I mean, those are some serious opponents, serious contenders. Guys that are in the top, at least top 15, top 10. So, but he's had 21 uh, fights with 16 wins and 5 losses. In the 16 wins, he's had 8 wins by knockout, 8 wins by decision, and in the 5 losses, he's had 1 loss by knockout and 4 by decision. Pretty wild. I can understand that why he's never lost by a submission, because he's an Olympic wrestler, like gold medal type of wrestler. But the fact that he's never submitted someone, that he's never won by submission, is kind of wild, honestly, when you think about it. But Peyton Tolbert is who he is fighting, and he is he was a wrestler like what like in school, like in I think what like junior high and like high school, but later on, I guess he was influenced by just mixed martial arts and the whole Conor McGregor wave, and later became more of a striker later on. And we mentioned Henry Cejudo's age of 38. Well, we got, like I said, another young gun, up and comer. Peyton Tolbert is only 27, and he is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Had a little bit of a hiccup, uh, and so he's only on a 1 fight winning streak over for Felipe Lima, just by decision. But before that, that's the only loss he's ever had. So he's has 11 matches with 10 wins and 1 loss. And in the 10 wins, he has 7 wins by knockout, 1 win by submission, and 2 by decision. And then the losses, he's never been knocked out, never been submitted, and only lost 1 by decision. And so this fight feels very similar kind of to the first fight on the card between Jan Blachowicz versus Bogdan Guskov there, where it's just the older, more wrestling based type of fighters fighting the kind of the young up and coming striker that's just young. That's the biggest thing to highlight, is just the age difference. But uh, just kind of like Jan Blachowicz, I don't see him winning that fight, but I also don't see him getting knocked out or submitted. So that's the same thing with Henry Cejudo. He's never been submitted, uh, and has only what was he never been submitted, but he has been knocked out though, hasn't he? Yeah, but just once. But he's gone to decision 4 times. So I think I'm going to go with the younger guy, and where it's kind of these guys that were champions just 5, 10 years ago, and now they're stepping stones and gatekeepers. But I don't think they're washed enough to where they're going to get completely bowled over by these young fresher fighters. But in this bantamweight bout between Henry Cejudo versus Peyton Talbot, I'm going with Peyton Talbot to win this. I think he's going to win just by decision. I think Henry Cejudo is hard to get out of there. That's not something that he's been been common in his career, getting knocked out or never been submitted. And so I don't see Peyton Talbot being the first one to do that. So in the bantamweight bout between Henry Cejudo versus Peyton Talbot, I got Peyton Talbot winning by decision. All right, so now then on to the flyweight bout between Brandon Moreno versus Turtsuro Terra, and so this fight kind of the same kind of matchup. You got the 20-year-old Tatsuro Tierra versus Brandon Moreno, who's not quite as old as 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 Henry Cejudo and Jan Blachowicz. He's actually still really young, which is wild to me. He was like one of the first Mexican UFC champions, and that was at flyweight, and he must have been one of the younger champions too, because he had the belt like pretty far back when he fought for it. Yeah, so that was in 2021, so like 4 years ago. So he would have been like 27 years old then, but he's still young and still up there with being one of the top number one, he's like the number two ranked flyweight. Uh, but let's see, he's had a decent run here, just with all the title opportunities and just staying in title contention. He's like the difference between Henry Cejudo and Jan Blachowicz is that he's still got youth to him. I think a impressive win here could lead to him getting a rematch over Alexander Pantoja, that's who he lost the belt to, and that's who's defending his belt on this card. But in Brandon Moreno's last 5 fights, he is 3-2, and those 2 losses came to Alexander Pantoja and Brandon Royval. And the thing about them, they were just split decisions, so it's not like Brandon Moreno's getting bowled over or anything here. And I like to go back to some of his most recent submission victory was rear naked choke over Davison Figueredo. And he has 33 fights with 23 wins and 8 losses. In his 23 wins, he has 5 wins by knockout, 11 wins by submission, 2 wins by decision, and then in the 8 losses, he's never been knocked out, never been submitted, so never finished in a fight. Has 8 losses by decision and then 2 draws. So definitely, I think that's definitely what this feels. This feels like this could be between Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Tierra, who he has a pretty impressive record for being 25 born January 27, 2000. You're seeing these guys that are born in 2000, pretty wild. But he has had a pretty good career. He is known for his kickboxing and judo type of striker, and he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights, and he's 7-1 altogether in his UFC career so far, and he's just on a 1 fight winning streak for Park Hyun Sung, a face crank. And in his 18 matches, he has 17 wins and 1 loss. In the 17 wins, he has 5 wins by knockout, 8 wins by decision, and 4 wins. 8 wins by submission, 4 wins by decision, and then just like Henry Cejudo, he's never been knocked out, never been submitted, and has only 1 loss by decision. So he's not getting stopped. So that makes this kind of a hard fight to pick, really. You would think just from picking that you would think that there's no way that the fight could go decision or yeah could end in a stoppage because neither one of them have ever been stopped in a fight. But I don't think I want to go a decision on my three picks here. So I feel like this is probably definitely a respectable step up in competition for Tetsuro Tierra. So I think Brandon Moreno is still like I said, just on the brink of getting a rematch against Alexander Pantoja. So I think, and I expect there to be an impressive performance by Brandon Moreno. And so, and just like they say, I always talk about how Tetsuro Tierra, these new fighters that come over from Japan. You think it's going to be the first Japanese uh, UFC champion, and they always a lot of uh, backing behind them, a lot of noise and stuff about them possibly being the first Japanese champion. But I just it usually just never usually the flame for it usually just kind of fizzles out. So I think Brandon Moreno is a step up in competitions for Tetsuro Tierra. So in this flyweight bout between Brandon Moreno versus Tetsuro Tierra, I'm going with Brandon Moreno to win this. I think he's going to win this by rear naked choke, and I think that'll probably come in the later rounds, maybe towards the end of the second into the third, because I think Brandon Moreno is probably going to be able to survive kind of the first wave of the striking by Tetsuro Tierra, but it'd be interesting to see uh, uh, how his cardio holds up against Moreno, who has good striking as well, but I would say probably a better wrestler. All right. Now then, on to the co-main event. You have a flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus Joshua Vaughn. So we know that Alexander Pantoja, there's definitely conversations and there's definitely interesting talks and people definitely it's for each generation. You got these certain waves of fighters that come in and that they're at their weight class and they go on a pretty long winning streak and and defend their belt several times, and before you know it they're calling them the greatest of all time. And so a lot of people have the 35-year-old Alexander Pantoja as considered as the greatest flyweight in UFC history. But I think he's definitely been a little disrespected just in regard to how dominant he has been. I'll give him that because he has been dominant. He is on a pretty long winning streak here. Yeah, so he's on a eight fight winning streak, and he is obviously 5-0 in his last five fights, and he has defended the flyweight championship about four times, and he won his last two fights by uh, by submission, rear naked choke, and he is 35 fights with 30 wins and five losses. In the 30 wins, he has 8 wins by knockout, 12 wins by submission, and 10 wins by decision. And then in the five loss, just like the previous two fighters in the previous fight, have never been knocked out, never been submitted, and then has five losses by decision. And then Joshua Van, who here we go, we got like another real young fighter versus kind of the old head, but uh, kind of hard to call these guys Unk and old head when they're the champion. I feel that way more about Henry Cejudo and Jan Blachowicz, but yeah, Joshua Van is only yeah only 24 years old, and he is considered, I believe, predominantly a striker, and he is 5-0 in his last five fights, but he did lose. He did lose the sixth fight back to Charles Johnson. He was KO punches, and in his 17 17 matches, he's has 15 wins and 2 losses. In the 15 wins, he has 7 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission, and 6 wins by decision. And then in the 2 losses, he's been knocked out once, submitted once, and then never lost by decision. So, looks like he's predominantly a striker where if he can't get the knockout, then he probably point strikes and wins off of just, damage and total significant strikes type of fighter. But I mean, I think he's taken a big step up in competition, uh, even though he is number one flyweight currently ranked, and he's only lost 2 fights in his entire career. But I just feel like Alexander Pantoja is just on another level. He's an elite. He's like a blue chip mixed martial arts fighter. So in this flyweight bout between Alexander Pantoja versus Joshua Vaughn for the flyweight championship bout between Alexander Pantoja, the champion, versus Joshua Vaughn, the challenger. So Alexander Pantoja has had two wins by rear naked choke back to back, and so I think he's going to kind of get a third one. He's going to have 3 rear naked choke victories back to back. And the only submission, he's only lost 2. Joshua Vaughn, he's only lost 2, one by knockout, and then his one submission loss was by rear naked choke, but that was several years ago. But I'm gonna have to see it. You're gonna have to prove to me, Joshua Van, that you're on the same level as Alexander Pantoja, who's kind of on a stratosphere, kind of on his own. So I'm looking for Alexander Pantoja to get his 3rd rear naked choke submission victory in this fight, and maybe it'll happen. Probably maybe happen in the later rounds. After they kind of wear each other down in these fights with Alexander Pantoja that I've seen recently, it just seems like he doesn't get tired at all, and he's at 100% fighting these guys. And in these later rounds, you get into late in the second and third, and he looks like 100%. Looks like he just stepped into the cage. So we'll have to see if Joshua Van can handle that, and withstand that. But if he can't, it may lead to him putting himself in a compromising condition, and will end up leaving his neck out there to get choked in a rear naked choke. All right, so now then, on to the main event of UFC 323, Dvalishvili versus Jan 2. And so we have a bantamweight bout, bantam championship bout between Merab Dvalishvili, the champion, versus Petr Yan, the challenger. And so these guys have fought before, not too long ago, and it was a relatively competitive fight, I do believe. So thing is with Merab Dvalishvili, he's on a pretty long winning streak here. Let's see. Yeah, he's on a 14 fight winning streak. You'd have to go back. You have to go 6 fights back for the bout against Petr Yan, which was a 5-round bout. That was a fight night main event, and it was a 5-round, 25-minute fight, and that just ended up being a unanimous decision. I think it just led more to Merab Dvalishvili being able to control the fight a little bit more on the ground, even though Petr Yan's probably the better striker. They have kind of similar styles, that whole Georgian, Dagestan type of fighters. I've got like Georgian, like wrestling, like elite type of wrestling from Merab Dvalishvili, and then you have the Dagestan like wrestling from Petr Yan, but I don't think it's not on the same level as Merab Dvalishvili. So I just feel like this fight's going to be it's going to be it's going to be round 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, probably uh, just in regards to their first fight that was back, what, March 11, 2023. So I just have a feeling this probably ain't going to be a whole lot of, it isn't going to be a lot different. I don't see Peter Yan really having a groundbreaking performance. Like that's what he'll need to win this fight. He'll have to, only way I see it happening is landing some type of lucky shot. But once you get into this weight class, there aren't a lot of knockout artists at 135 pounds. Not saying that it doesn't exist, but I just feel this fight here feels like it's probably gonna go the way the first one went. But Merab Dvalishvili's 5-0 in his last five fights, of course. And then Peter Yan, we talked about him, the whole Georgian like wrestling, but would say he's a pretty good striker too. Relies on that quite a bit. And see, did I go over? I think I went over Merab Dvalishvili's win-loss record. Sorry about that. We go over his win-loss record. So yeah, Merab Dvalishvili's had 25 fights with 21 wins and 4 losses. In the 21 wins, he has 3 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission, and 16 wins by decision. So I mean, there's a good chance, most likely, percentage wise, most likely if Merab Dvalishvili wins this fight, it's more than likely going to be by decision. And there are these ground and pound type of fights, and just kind of holding people down and laying and praying. And even when he does that, they're still enjoyable to watch for the most part, like because he does it in such a dominant fashion. And then in his 4 losses, never been knocked out, uh, submitted just once, and then 3 by decision. But like we said, that's been a while back. That's been all the way back 2018. Ricky Simone, been a while. So we were about to talk about Peter Yan, another Russian fighter who's has a great ground game, but uh, seems to rely on his striking initially in fights. And so Peter Yan is 3-2 in his last 5 fights, but he is 3-0 in his last 3 fights, which obviously is what led to this title shot, I'm sure, and also because he beat guys like Song Yadong, former champion Davison Figueroa, and Marcus McGee. And in his 24 matches, he has 19 wins with 5 losses. And in the 19 wins, you have 7 wins by knockout. Another like great wrestler, but only 1 win by submission. Has a great ground. They whole send them to Dagestan and forget them, or send them to Georgia and forget them. That whole Russian society culture of great wrestlers. But yeah, no submissions really. But I mean, Merab Dvalishvili's kind of like that too. You'd think being able to dominate someone on the ground so much and holding them down like that so much that an arm or a neck or a leg or something would be hanging out there for you to grab onto, but not as much as you'd think. And then he's had 11, just 1 win by submission, 11 wins by decision, and then in his 5 losses, he's has 0 losses by knockout, 0 losses by submission. So there's quite a few fighters on this card that have never been finished in a fight. So that leads to something kind of interesting. You want to see if some of these fighters ever get knocked out or submitted for the first time. That seems like a pretty predominant thing on this card. But he has lost 4 by decision, and then the 1 disqualification, which led to Aljamain Sterling becoming the champion, I do believe. But I mean, he ended up having a rematch with him and lost by decision. But yeah, it's pretty impressive by Peter Yan, another fighter that has been a champion a couple of years back, and it seems like he got back on track and got himself in line to be able to have another title shot. And still, he's only 32 years old. But I don't know. I don't see this fight going any different really than the first fight between these two. And Merab Dvalishvili is only 34, so this doesn't really count as old head versus new head or anything like that. You got Alexander Pantoja and Merab Dvalishvili as some of the you argue some of the best flyweights and bantamweight champions of all time. So in this bantamweight championship bout, the main event between Merab Dvalishvili, the champion, versus Peter Yan, the challenger, I'm going with Peter Yan to retain his belt, the bantamweight championship bout, and I think it's going to be a whole lot of the same. You know, start these fights where Peter Yan tries to get a little bit of striking off. Merab Dvalishvili may may have some interest in the striking, but at the end of the day, at the end of these rounds and at the end of the fight and his decision on how he's going to fight, it's going to be taking Peter Yan down and taking him down. And like I said, Peter Yan's best chance of winning this is probably by knockout or being able to get Merab Dvalishvili really off of his base and out of sorts, and maybe be able to uh, get him rocked and somehow be able to get a hold of an arm or a neck. But other than that, I don't see it happening for Peter Yan. So I see, like I said earlier, that this is I feel like this is just going to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of just the continued fight between these two. And I think it's going to just lead to a unanimous decision victory again. So we have a bantamweight championship bout between Merab Dvalishvili, the champion, versus Peter Yan, the challenger, and I got Peter Yan winning winning the second fight, and just going to be similar to the first. So we got three decisions on this card and two rear naked choke predictions on this main card. But anyways, that's UFC 323, Dvalishvili versus Yan Yan 2. And so that's UFC 323, Merab Dvalishvili versus Peter Yan 2. Every time I read it with it just being Yan, I want to say Jan Blachowicz, but he's the curtain jerker for this fight, not the main event. So, and that's December 6, 2025. So this Saturday coming up, T-Mobile Arena, Paradise, Nevada, United States. So I'm ready for it. And I think, yeah, unlike the previous pay-per-view, I do believe this card is at your the standard time. I do believe these. I think the last paper. I think what is the last? Yeah, it was the last pay-per-view card, and yeah, no, it was. I think it was the last fight night card, and maybe the pay-per-view card before that. They were over in the Middle East somewhere, and the cards, like the prelims, started like at like 10 a.m. and the main event or the main card started at like 2 o'clock or something. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So can I get a check, please?